What's up guys? Everyone's been asking for it, so I'm just doing a quick tutorial on how to adjust the speed trigger on the Heretic Labs Article 1. We're going to take the trigger from stock like this to this. So you're going to need the optional parts bag. I use a small Allen key and then also just a flathead screwdriver, but anything long will do. So first thing you're going to want to do is to remove the rear pin. So you can get to the board inside to remove that. And then underneath the board you have the trigger. So you can see the board there. And what I would do is I only remove the front pin, not the back one. I leave that one just because it's a lot easier, as it keeps the trigger in place whilst you're working on it. Another little tip that I have is that front screw, I don't take it all the way out, because you'll be able to see inside, you'll be able to keep the spring in place that's attached to the trigger. So once again, just something that I've learned that just makes everything a bit easier. Next, you want to get the optional part screws. These are what you're going to use to adjust the trigger, and screw them into the holes in the top of the trigger. There should be 3 in total, and just get them all in first before you tighten them. And this is how it should look once you've got all 3 of them in. So next, I essentially try and set a base. So I slightly pull the trigger, I screw in the front one until I find some resistance. I screw in the back one until I get some resistance. And then finally I go for the middle one, and I do the middle one just until it's flush. So once I've got that sorted, before I put it back together, now I go back to the middle screw and I essentially undo it 1 full turn. So you do it counterclockwise. And this is now essentially set to my base point. So I find it easier to try and adjust the trigger from this point rather than sort of going, bit by bit by bit. I sort of know that this is sort of a good starting ground, and that's just, how I've done it. So this is the only annoying bit, is that after every time, just to check it, you need to put the gun back together. If it's your first time, I'd recommend putting in the back pin, because I was finding that I thought I had it right, and then once I actually got everything pinned back in, it wasn't there. So now this is where it takes a little bit longer. Patience is definitely needed. So essentially I just try to find the biting point, and when you've got it in your hand, you'll be able to feel it. As you slowly pull it, it's like that point just before that red button on the inside is essentially pressed by the trigger. So once I've found that point, I essentially want to try and hold it as still as possible. Take off the upper receiver, and I'm going to adjust just the front screw. So once again, I turn it very slowly until I feel a bit of resistance, and that's just getting it even tighter. Now it's just really how much more you want to do. So it comes into now all the fine tuning. My tip is, once you have this pull and travel on the trigger done, is I just adjust the middle bit, but look how little you do it. That's it. I do it bit by bit, put the gun back together, retest it, and keep doing that. So another little tip as well is you also want to make sure that you still have your safety, because if you do it too much, I've found in the past, is that then you don't get a safety, or it will just fire on safety, which obviously is no good. So essentially, you put it on safety, you get your Allen key or whatever you're using, and you just tighten the back one very slowly, literally with 1 finger, until you feel a tiny bit of resistance. And that's like at the point so that you can still use the selector and still have everything else working. And you've gone too far if your trigger's essentially like this when you're on semi, nothing's just happening.